for some of these guys, the big thing, they want to get a ring. There's a reason why Jared Verse came over to Florida State. He was thought that he'd have, as being the program as it is, and this is still Florida State University. Don't get it wrong. But you was expected to come in here and fight for a national championship or in a college football playoff berth if he went undefeated 13-0 this season, won his ACC championship like he was told. That would be enough to get in.
Hey guys, it's Terrence Mann. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Noles.
Hey, what's up? This is Peter Ward, a.k.a. E-Dub, in the house. We're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Live, go Noles.
Hi, this is Charlie Ward, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, go Noles.
This is Terrell Buckley. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. No Bloody.
But perhaps better known as the greatest corner to ever step on a football field, Deion Primetime Sanders.
Great Deion Sanders, my brother. What's going on, man? I could wake up to that greeting every day, man. That was awesome.
Hello, Noles fans. This is former Seminole Derek Brooks, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, presented to you by Noel Game Day.
James Wilder Jr. What's going on, James?
Thanks for having me on. FSOD, Florida State or Die, and go Noles.
William Bar None Floyd.
Gentlemen, what's up?
What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoGameDay.com. We're here live on a not-so-wonderful and fantastic Wednesday. Hasn't been a great week so far. These last 72 hours have been a pretty brutal one for this Florida State fan base. And everyone actually covering this school, kind of confused at the moment. But we've got a jam-packed show tonight. We're going to talk about Florida State and not getting picked to go into the 2023 college football playoff. Some brutal news on Sunday after Florida State won the 2023 ACC championship. So the Seminoles and the FSU fan base didn't get a lot of time to celebrate after winning something which was big for this program and something to see the turnaround under Mike Norvell. But we'll be giving our full thoughts and just an open discussion on that after it's been a crazy last couple of days. I'm going to jump into transfer portal because it doesn't stop. Right now, it doesn't stop. Last December was very busy, and we're already starting off hot already on December 6th. So we're going to talk transfer portal, Seminoles leaving the program, some maybe testing the waters, a few tweets here and there on some ideas and some intentions of doing things, but maybe not formally happening yet. But we're going to give our thoughts on the transfer portal. We'll talk Johnny Wilson, too, opting out of the Orange Bowl and declaring for the NFL draft. And we're going to talk some basketball, too, at the end. Cameron Fletcher, really, really serious injury. Austin was there in attendance for that. So a wild weekend up there in North Carolina, but glad to be back here to be able to really talk about Florida State and not getting a chance to fight for a national championship this year after going 13-0. But with me this evening, we got a jam-packed one. We got a quad box. But at the top of me is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer at NoGameDay.com. And then we've got Dustin Lewis at the very bottom, our editor-in-chief. And then right next to him is Dylan Riera. He is our staff writer covering Florida State football, helping out with some recruiting here and there as well. But gentlemen, here we are. It's I don't think talking to you guys back in August when we were preparing and previewing this team that I'd be able to say in December, Florida State went 13-0, won the ACC championship, and isn't going to the college football playoff.
It's a time. It's a time to be alive.
It's been a very sad, what is it now, 72 hours? A little more?
Feels like it's been
it's been decades since the ACC championship Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever time we got out of there. Just a unbelievable result to how the season should have been. And, even as we sit here now on Wednesday night and going in these next few days, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's been a few days and, you sit here and you try to rationalize it every which way, and every which way you look at it, you just keep getting a little more frustrated. I think that's kind of the sentiment that everybody, even non-Florida State fans have. It's like you look at this any which way and it just doesn't make sense, And then you have people out there like Paul Feinbaum who are like, listen, just stop. What is something along the lines of the fake outrage or something like that. What about this outrage? is fake. How can you tell people just to stop? I don't know. I don't know how to rationalize an irrational decision.
It only gets worse with every playoff committee member that comes out and says something, and they all contradict themselves about what happened in there. Like, at this point, just shut the hell up. I'm tired of hearing it. Like, clearly you guys don't know what happened in there. We don't know what happened in there. Just leave it at that at this point.
Yeah, no, we heard it from all the national guys, and just going through the night, or not the night, but the Sunday of noon when we found out, and you could just feel something in the morning whenever you saw Michael Alford having to post a lot of things about Florida State's resume. Even I think Mike Norvell was retweeting something here and there, just showing what Florida State put on paper this year compared to really Alabama, and it just turned into a whole shitstorm, honestly, that day. And you could hear too from some of the analysts up there the last couple of weeks, really specifically, of preaching for Alabama to have that chance to get up there in the top 4. And that's why I was asking you guys after that game we saw where Brock Glenn, you had a true freshman quarterback go out there and have to play. And, Mike Norvell had to switch that whole offense up. I was asking, is the committee going to do something crazy here? Could they do something wild and really not select Florida State to be in this top 4? And here we are. So be it. We had everything prepared for the most part for Florida State to get into this top 4 spot. And, we thought maybe Florida State would be facing against Washington. Maybe they'd be at that 3 spot, and then they'd be able to face them, go down to NOLA and face there because Michigan would want to take on in the Rose Bowl. Just poof, all a dream there. All kind of just bogus stuff. I guess we were putting in our head. I guess we're just idiots.
Well, you've heard me the last couple of weeks on the show. I've probably been maybe the most vocal about us 3 of saying it's not even a question. Florida State's going to go to the playoff if they go undefeated. It doesn't matter if Jordan Travis is out for the season. And Florida State's ranking by the College Football Playoff Committee week by week kind of reflected that mantra. And then it just kind of seems like they totally flipped heel on what they were regarding when it came to these final College Football Playoff rankings. I mean, it's kind of insane. You're talking about Texas going from 7 to 3, a jump of 4. Same thing with Bama going from 8 to 4 after seeing that top 8 barely change, through the first 5 or whatever so playoff rankings, and then you just have changes of that magnitude. It's a little fishy. And college football, it kind of went away from the BCS system to avoid scenarios like this, and then it comes out 13 people in a conference room make a decision like this that changes college football, makes FSU not only lose out on this opportunity, but also millions of dollars of revenue in the process. And what's frustrating is you look at all these other polls, Florida State, number 4 in the AP poll, Florida State, number 4 in the BCS poll, the old system, and Florida State, number 3 in the coaches poll. So the head coaches around the country obviously valued what Florida State did, but we let 13 people take them out of the college football playoff.
Yeah, Dustin, go ahead, Austin.
Not only those, if you look at the SP Plus rankings, they're ahead of Washington, Texas, and Alabama. Like, it's not just those polls. If you look at the analytics, Florida State's a better team than some of those other teams are. And I heard what the committee's rationale was with the injury to Jordan Travis. I'm calling bullshit on it right here, right now. I just don't think that's true. If you really think Jordan Travis was the issue, Florida State would have been 4 last week, and they wouldn't be 5 above Georgia this week. That's just not what it was. What it came down to was they had to find a way to put the SEC champion in, but they couldn't do it without putting Texas in, a team who had already beaten Alabama. And, we left the arena or the stadiums Saturday night, Sunday morning. Florida State had odds of like minus 600 of making the playoffs to Bama's plus 250 or plus 300. Then by the time I wake up on Sunday, they were even at like minus 110, just in a span of 11 hours. That doesn't happen by accident. Even ESPN's playoff predictor had Florida State at like a 97% chance to Alabama's 44% chance. 12 hours later, Alabama's in and Florida State's out. That's just, I don't care what they're telling me about Jordan Travis or they're not the best looking team right now. That doesn't happen in 11 hours of thinking.
Yeah, Dustin, I think, you touched on it. You said you were like, you were the most vocal one about we're in the playoff as long as we win. And I don't think it was unreasonable to think that way. It's because, that's what we were being told and shown and repeatedly, reminded, is that as long as FSU wins, they're in. I mean, how many, when Jordan Travis went down, you had Dan Orlovsky saying, this shouldn't be an indicator that Florida State should be out of the playoff. And then suddenly come Sunday, he's saying some outrageous take where he's saying this team's not the same team that win 13-0. You have Greg McElroy saying the same thing. He repeatedly said Florida State, as long as they win, they should get in. And then here we are Sunday morning, Greg McElroy completely turns heel. The committee themselves, I think we just talked about it before we got on air, but I went back and looked at that second edition of the ranking that they did. And when Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman were out and they struggled against Pitt, Boo Corrigan is on record as saying that, listen, they took those injuries into account and they still think that this team has what it takes to make the playoff. That's two members of the offense right there who are the two leading receivers for your team. And they're both out in the game. And you thought that team was still capable of making the playoff. And you have one player that's out now on the offense. And that suddenly changes everything. I get the quarterback position is probably, accounts for a bit more, but the logic there is so inconsistent. And I think that's where all this frustration stems from, is how inconsistent they were in evaluating this criteria. And I think it's a system that's based, that's foundation is tainted by inconsistencies. I think it's been that way since the college football playoff started. I don't think this is the new issue.
The Greg McElroy switch up was insane. Literally all year. My best friend back home is an Alabama fan, and like all year I'd be sending Greg McElroy quotes going, it's crazy how unbiased he is. Like, here's him going against Alabama, here's him praising Florida State really all season long. And even the week of conference championship week, I have two different quotes. He went on Andy Staples show and said, if we hold the sanctity of the college football season, the regular season, which he does, Florida State won all the results. Florida State doesn't have a terrible resume, but also acknowledge that they're a team that's undefeated. And ultimately, I don't care if you win by 1 or 100. If you win the games, you deserve the credit. So I think Florida State is absolutely in complete control over their own destiny, which is why Texas needs help, which is why Alabama needs help. Then he goes on ESPN same day and goes, we don't even need to entertain the idea of a one-loss team potentially jumping them a la Texas and Alabama. Florida State's in. They're going to take care of business, not if. They're going to take care of business this weekend, and they'll be in. They deserve to be. Sunday afternoon, he's going, Alabama's in.
Did you know? I mean, I'm watching it after hearing all that from him specifically, and he looked a little timid just sitting there too. He said Alabama, should get in, but he was not as passionate about that take as he was these last few weeks with Florida State. I'd love a supercut, a compilation of all of these talking head media pundits before and after this last ranking. I mean, Kirk Herbstreit, as recently as right after the Florida game, said Florida State's 4 quarters away from controlling their own destiny. And then suddenly he launches this campaign of best team versus most deserving and all this switch up. How do you explain that? There's no explanation for that other than this. It was a campaign. I don't know.
Yep.
I mean, at risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, yeah, how else do you explain these people switching? Either they're really incompetent at their job and they shouldn't be an analyst for college football, or this was intentional,
There's so many that switched up. It seems a little fishy. I mean, from the second we got to college game day on Saturday morning, Florida State was already getting discredited. And then it comes to
you felt it.
The end of that game. And I mean, it's just a full, like you kind of said, Dylan, it felt like a full-on campaign from ESPN. I mean, basically everyone on that show, you had 1 or 2 guys, Booger McFarland being one of them, really defending Florida State. But other than that, people that had good things to say about FSU throughout the entirety of the season, suddenly judging them for a performance against Louisville where they covered the spread and won with their third-string quarterback. No one's remembering. It suddenly seems like no one remembers Tate Rodemaker is going to be back for that bowl game in a couple of weeks, or if they were going to be in the playoffs, he would have passed concussion protocol and be back.
Back by Monday.
Right, and he's a quarterback that went out and beat Florida on the road in his first meaningful start as a collegiate quarterback, and the committee rewarded that by moving Florida State up from 5 to 4. So we live in a society that's based off precedent. I could go all the way back to 2014 and talk about all the different precedent that they could have based their decision off of, and it breaks almost every single one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's what I was talking with Dustin about once we got done after the game. Once we got back to the hotel at friggin' 2 a.m., we were talking about how now Florida State was going to have Tate Rodemaker back, and you love having Rodemaker because he knows that system so well, and you're not going to have Brock Glenn out there. And, if they're really – and I don't think it's the case. I think there's definitely more to it. But if their excuse was they didn't know – they just didn't do their homework enough to understand, too. You're also going to have Daryl Jackson back, a fresh one, which talking to someone close to the program on that night, watching warm-ups, Daryl Jackson's a different kind of animal and the trenches there. Possibly, like you've said, Dustin, possibly the most talented defensive lineman that Florida State has on its roster, and it's a fresh one. It's a fresh player that hasn't seen a snap all season, and you're getting Rodemaker back. Rodemaker would have been cleared by Monday. He would have been back, and you don't give Florida State the two. We haven't talked about the defense. Florida State's defense, that's a national championship caliber defense, and you're not allowing that to compete. You saw a big-time takeaway there from Tatum Bethune, live national television, took away a touchdown from Louisville, which was instrumental in that game alone. And you're taking away from Jared Verse and Braden Fisk?
Right.
And that defensive back room that's been phenomenal under first-year defensive back coach Pat Surtain. It's just it's brutal. We'll talk about the players, too, and their reaction, but – just off of media people covering it and the day-to-day it's a brutal hit for a program that has done a whole ton to turn things around. And, for Mike Norvell, they definitely knew before when it went live. You could tell, and I'm watching the rankings come out, Norvell knew. That's why they're having to put out a lot of stuff. And Alfred was having to tweet out a whole ton of stuff that morning. And I just knew that was just not a good sign. But seeing the reactions, some of the players had to have known, and shucks. It's a shitty situation.
To your point on the defense, I'm taking a lot of this stuff from an article that will be coming out some point this week whenever Dustin feels like editing it. But Florida State's defense has just been absolutely unreal when they've needed to be. Every single game, every opponent they've played has scored under their season average in points. 5 times of the 13, they held the team's either their worst or second worst performance of the season, points-wise. So you're going against a Florida State defense where you have a 40% chance of having your worst game. That's a national championship defense. I don't care what happens. I don't care who they're playing. There's so much talk this week on, Washington would score 40, Michigan would score 30. Bullshit. If LSU could only score 17 before garbage time, there's no chance. And LSU is by far the best offense in the country. It's not even close. Washington scored, 15 points on Arizona State? Mm-hmm. Florida State could win a 13-10 kind of game against them. They absolutely could. They could win a 13-10 kind of game against Michigan. To say that they wouldn't stand a chance against these guys and they don't have a chance to win the national championship, why are we going into hypotheticals? They've proven on the field that they are good enough.
Exactly. I think, it's not like this was the ACC championship games. The fact that we're talking about on-field performance secondary to the rest of the media outcry, by the way, is something in and of itself. But it's not like this is an old AC championship game where it's Atlantic and Coastal and it's a 4-loss, team on the other side. This was a 2-loss Louisville ranked within the top 15, averaging 30 points per game, including a game against the mighty SEC. And Florida State's defense held them to 6. It's like the way everybody was talking about it was like only offense is played. Like, oh, everyone's got a high-powered offense, so everyone's going to score a whole bunch of points. Mm-hmm. And let's not factor in the defense whatsoever. We had a stretch there, the 3-game home stretch, where nobody scored more than 20 points against our defense.
Dude, they could barely score a touchdown earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And
24 all year
at home.
The statistic right now is like 38 straight possessions, and we have 1 score against us, and it was the unnecessary roughness penalty against Florida, which probably shouldn't have been one.
And this is funny too. Just real quick, I know you're going to say something, Dustin, but this is hilarious. This is a good point from Dale Brown. I want to bring this up, saying, and the Michigan cheating story has completely vanished. It sure did. They are in love with Harbaugh right now. They are eating up everything. Have you seen that flip? That is flipped completely to absolutely loving what Michigan's doing, and they were so impressed. They didn't have Harbaugh out there on the sidelines to get those wins. They are eating up the Harbaugh stuff. They think that's their good story of the year, that if Harbaugh wasn't on the sidelines, he still won a national championship.
Just shows at the end of the day, they're a news company. They're not a sports media company. They're pumping in these narratives, and they know what they're doing. But I was just going to talk about, we talked about Florida State's defense at 1 touchdown allowed in the last 38 possessions. That's been incredible. It's since Jordan Travis went down with his injury. Only 5 total scoring possessions allowed since Travis was injured. And then we hear all these narratives about Florida State's offense and how they can't win a playoff game or a national championship with Tate Rodemaker or Brock Glenn at quarterback. And they're not remembering that Michigan has J.J. McCarthy. So let's talk about these stats. Since Jordan Travis was injured, Rodemaker and Brock Glenn have combined for 441 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. J.J. McCarthy, vaunted quarterback in the country, 436 total yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions.
Hey, man, it's the Big Ten. They got nasty defenses up there. Can't count them out. Fucking bullshit.
Hey, there's one F-bomb.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I said I wouldn't.
No, it's great.
Did it.
No.
It's insane. Like not only is Michigan getting away with the cheating scandal, Harbaugh was suspended the first 3 games for recruiting violations. He's been suspended half the season for 2 completely different issues. And everyone's like, "Hey, number 1 team in the country. They have the same resume as Florida State. Let's put them number 1." What are we doing?
Yep.
What are we doing? It makes absolutely no sense. There are 2 ranked wins, 3 ranked wins. Ohio State, good win. Ohio State's a good football team. Penn State is somehow a top 10 team. I don't see it. Iowa is somehow a top 20 team. Do not get me started on Iowa. Florida State's at least beaten LSU and Clemson in Death Valley. Still no one in the ACC has beaten them since 2016. You don't want to know what happened in 2016. Prince died. The Obama administration was still around. Drake was still good. Like, it's insane that Florida State's resume has been written off as, they played in the ACC. Michigan has beaten absolutely nobody. Their non-conference was like UNLV, East Carolina. They didn't play any Power 5 teams in the non-conference. Florida State scheduled 2 SEC teams away from home, won both of them by at least 2 possessions. It's unbelievable. And even if Clemson isn't Clemson of the past, still nobody's beaten.
They came up for that game. That was their wake. They had to switch their whole thing around, and they did from that game.
And
let's stop acting like most of those teams played up for that game. UM's going to play up for the game. It's a rivalry. Florida's going to play up for the game. It's a rivalry. Everyone's going to play up to the game. And it's not like Clemson's a bad program suddenly just because they lost 3 or 4 games this year. That's still a solid program. They were reigning ACC champions. They won that last year. I mean, again, I'll repeat it. I think any way you spin it, it doesn't make sense. You can go through all the numbers. I think David Hale's tweet the day of where he broke down, the wins versus bowl eligible Power 5 and strength of record. And, whatever you could point to was highly favoring the Florida State Seminoles. And so I think that's why people are left grasping at straws elsewhere, is because on-field performance, it doesn't make sense. I mean, Michael Alford said it best. He said they preferred to use, what was it? Something around predictive matchups instead of evaluating on-field performance. I think that is the biggest travesty out of all of this, is that, like Austin said, with all these justifications they're pulling out, the main one they're pointing to is that the unavailability of key players somehow allowed them to look ahead and somehow allowed them to predict what Florida State was going to look like once they got into the playoffs. Let me ask you something. When was the last time the committee predicted something with absolute certainty? I don't think ever, I mean, so what makes you think that they can use their own self-created prediction of what Florida State would have looked like as the foundational basis for leaving them out of the playoff? And I think that they got embarrassed last year by putting TCU in, even though they lost their conference championship. And this year they said, we're not going to do that again. And here you are in another controversy in the spotlight, And
it's just crazy because are we forgetting that TCU went to the playoff and beat Michigan? I mean, they won. They won a playoff game. They earned the right to go to the national championship.
And nobody predicted that they were going to do that. Everybody said the same thing. They're going to lose by 3 scores. They're going to lose by 40. This, that, the other. They played in the final game.
And everyone talks about Michigan's vaunted defense. They gave up 51 points in a playoff game. And they're the number 1 team in the country now. It's all ass backwards in my opinion. And we got away from this system to prevent things like this, but then we let 13 people in a conference room with human bias make this decision. I think it's become clear at the very least that the playoff committee has to be abolished, and there has to be some other kind of metric that they put together to judge the system. Because
how about any metric? I mean,
you get mad
go back to the BCS. I mean, when you allow
get mad at numbers,
it's better to let a computer and a system decide than people who can be swayed by their own biases.
You know, I make mention of it, and yet another
safer too.
And yet another long article writing, I make mention of how like they wanted to move away from the rigid numbers because it couldn't factor in the intangibles, right? But what the committee has shown us is they just went to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Like they're not looking at those same numbers. They're looking at eye test and quality losses, whatever the hell that means. And these things that were not listed in the criteria for when they first created the committee. Strength of schedule, win-loss record was the first thing that they mentioned. Things of that nature. We've gone so far away from what I think it was intended to be, and it's a system on a faulty foundation of human error. I think you're always going to get controversy as long as this is the format. It's Florida State this year. Who is it next year? And next year is worse. You're picking between 12 and 13. You don't have one loss or one, undefeated to lean on. You don't have conference championship as a decider at the 12 to 13 spot. What makes you think it's going to get any easier after this year? I highly doubt it does.
And the one difference, well, there's a couple differences, but the main difference between Florida State and Alabama and Texas, besides that those other two schools both have one loss, they're each going to be in the SEC next season.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the TCU point real quick because nothing has pissed me off more than people going, we don't want a TCU to happen again. Did you know last year was the only year we've had two competitive semifinal games? Because it's true. 2014, Oregon beat Florida State 59-20. 2015, both games were blowouts. Clemson beat Oklahoma by 20, and Alabama beat Michigan State by 38. 2016, Clemson shut out Ohio State 31-0. 2017, Alabama beat Clemson 24-6. 2018, Clemson beat Notre Dame 30-3. 2019, LSU beats Oklahoma 63-28. 2020, Alabama beats Notre Dame 31-14, and Ohio State beats Clemson 49-28. 2021, Alabama beat Cincinnati 27-6, and Georgia beat Michigan 34-11. Last year was the only year we've had a competitive semifinal out of all of these years. And people are like, we don't want TCU. I would be thrilled with the TCU situation right now. Two competitive semifinal games, and I get what the championship ended up becoming. But if you go back even to the BCS days, it's rare we get competitive national championships. The average margin of victory in conference championships is 2 touchdowns. Or national championships, 2 touchdowns. People need to give up on this. We want competitive game scenarios. We don't get it that often. Maybe 1 every 3 years we get competitive national championships. I hate how much goalpost shifting has gone around these last 3 days because everything they've brought up has not been the precedent in years past, like Dylan was saying. It's just it has not been the case.
It's blatant, and it's blatant goalpost shifting. And the moment you say something about it, it's, get over it, Florida State fan. Like, this happens to people.
It doesn't.
I don't know.
It's never happened to anyone.
Right. That's the precedent. It's never happened to any undefeated Power 5. But I think there are significant ramifications to the decision they made, right? There's significant things that change as a result of this decision alone. And I think part of what Dustin said is how, I think the statistic, I could be wildly off base, was something like 9 of the top 12 are either Big 10 or SEC or headed
12 of the top 13.
There you go. 12 of the top 13. So essentially the message they sent this year by leaving out the one exception is that this isn't a Power 5 anymore.
Yep.
That ACC's football is so inferior to the other conferences. And I'm not even going to count the Big 12 because Texas is going there next year. So let's just say it for what it is. It's 2 conferences in the final right now. It's a Power 2. They just created the Power 2 and they put it on blast for everyone to see.
Yep. They've shown that you can go undefeated You can win your conference. You can have 3 wins, not just top 25 wins, but 3 wins over top 25 teams in the final college football playoff poll. And if you're not in the SEC or Big Ten, you are not going to make that college football playoff. It's unbelievable. It now makes it uncompetitive for Florida State. We've already seen these arguments, since going back for years now, but before the year was when FSU really fired that public shot at the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now there's so much ammunition in the bag and the evidence that Florida State, they've got to do everything that they can to get into the Big Ten or into the SEC as soon as possible. It doesn't matter how much money they're going to have to owe for that grant of rights agreement, even though it goes till 2036. If you remain here, it's just going to get worse.
I'm curious, real quick on the grant of rights. I'm curious if there's any kind of like breach of trust statement in there. And Florida State can go to it and say, ESPN completely violated this trust agreement that we had by doing this, and maybe that's their way out. Going back to with the 12-team playoff, at least we're going to have automatic qualifiers now, where if you win your conference championship, you're automatically locked in. But how are we in 2023 and we're just now getting automatic qualifiers? Why is Division I FBS college football the only level of football that has subjective ways into the playoffs? Everywhere else, NFL, FCS, Division II, Division III, high school, it's all objective. You win and you're in. It's very simple. Why does it come down to 13 people that are going to be in hospice care next week making these decisions?
Hopefully.
Damn.
Like,
whoa.
It just and the sad thing is we all saw this coming when it was announced as a 4-team playoff in 2012. We all saw it coming. I was like, there's 5 conferences. Shouldn't there be more than 4 spots? It doesn't make much sense. But it
Not
took until
much of brains.
It took really until this year for it to be the biggest issue. It was a little bit of an issue in 2014 because you had Baylor and TCU, who were 11-1 teams, and TCU didn't win. I forget which team actually won the conference that year because it's just been a long couple of days. But they could have been in the argument, and Ohio State with a third-string quarterback gets in because they blasted Wisconsin in the conference championship game, 59-0 or whatever it was. But we all knew this was going to be an issue, and they still it ended up happening to Florida State, and both times it has happened to Florida State. In 2014, they were an undefeated 13-0, the only undefeated team, and they get knocked down to 3 because they didn't pass the eye test. They made up this game control statistic. This year, Florida State's the first undefeated Power 5. Let's just put quotes around it because obviously we all agree they've set the precedent. The ACC isn't a Power 5 anymore. They're the first Power 5 team out of the top 4. They've done it to Florida State twice now, and Florida State already raised hell at the beginning of the year, saying, "Hey, I don't know if we could be competitive in the ACC," and they got a lot of flack for it. And if we're doing our tin hat conspiracy thing, I think that kind of counted in this because Boo Corrigan's an NC State guy. He doesn't want people bashing his conference like Florida State just did. He'd be like, let's stick it to him real quick.
But he'd rather sign
the
death warrant. He'd rather sign the death warrant to the conference. Like, how does? Oh my god.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which
I'll bring up.
I'll go to rant with the ACC later, but I know we've got some other stuff to go to.
Yeah, I'm gonna share this video that was just posted on Twitter. Actually, hopefully audio will work. Y'all let me know. But this is from Herb Street. So this is well in the middle of November. I believe this was on November 14th. So this is on the Tuesday before the North Alabama game. This is before Jordan Travis was hurt. But let's hear from Kirk Herb Street.
I can't hear him at all.
Yeah, it's not working.
No, it's not working. Hold up.
You always do this.
I don't know. StreamYard needs to get a grip.
Be better, Logan.
Be better, StreamYard.
I wish Kurt Bergstreet would open his mouth and nothing would come out. That'd be perfect.
That'd be amazing considering what we've got in the last 3 weeks.
Wouldn't that be great? Here you
Texas
go.
is kind of boxed. There's one metric, but it's not the only metric. So I'm just like you guys. I'm assuming Texas is kind of boxing Alabama out. But if you keep winning and bouncing off of guardrails and Alabama keeps getting better and better, it's worth at the very least a discussion there at the end.
And what if both of them boxed out someone that was undefeated? That could happen too. We could
Yeah,
have a lot to
there you
talk
go.
about on selection day.
Yep.
That's right when Reese flipped on Florida State. We put out multiple articles, and through to the middle of the season, we were putting out tons of content around Reese Davis and his offseason podcast. Dustin, he was talking about it, saying Florida State, Jordan Travis, potential Heisman winner. Florida State's going to make it into that college football playoff in that top 4. And some flips right around here where now Alabama maybe has the chance to come back into this college football playoff picture. And this is kind of where this narrative begins.
You never know. Let's
Florida
look at the
State
top
don't want to
6.
hear that, Reese. That's not what
I
they
didn't
want to
call any names.
Yeah.
No, head-to-head is one metric, but it's not.
We could have a lot to talk about on selection day.
Yep.
That could happen too. We could have them boxed out someone that was undefeated.
Reese Davis, man, he's a sly.
We could have a lot to talk about on selection day.
But it's so blatant, right? I mean, like, these are the same guys who all season long they said, "Listen, this is your task. Go undefeated, win your conference, and you'll play in the college football playoff." And so that's what Florida State did. They said, "You got it. That's exactly what we're gonna do." And what you expect them to be okay that this happened? That two teams who already played each other and settled it on the field are given the opportunity to potentially rematch each other in the same year? Nobody gets that. I mean, nobody. It just, again, I'll keep going back. It doesn't make sense any way you spin it. There's logical fallacies written all over the place.
Which, if the whole objective is to find the best teams, we already know Texas is better than Alabama. They beat them by 10 in Tuscaloosa. It's not like it was a neutral field or is in DKR Memorial. That was in Tuscaloosa, and it wasn't close. Like, that was Texas whooped their ass most of that second half.
And
so if the goal is to find the 4 best teams, we don't know someone that's better than Florida State. We haven't seen it. We know Texas. It's not even like Texas was the 1 or the 2 seed, and you could argue Alabama's in. They barely squeaked in as a 3 seed. So why is Alabama, who already has proven that they're 10-point dogs, and don't give me that the game happened in September shit. Boo Corrigan said it doesn't matter when the game is played, the game is played.
Right.
So I that's the one thing. Well, I guess there's a few things, but it's that's one of the things that made zero sense to me.
You know what? I'll say something else. I'll take it a step further. I think we've hyper focused on this whole Alabama versus Florida State conversation a little too much. Texas lost to a mid-10s, mid-13s Oklahoma team.
Yeah, but at least that's a rivalry game. Oklahoma, Texas delivers 9 times out of 10. Like, that's always a great game, no matter how good or bad the teams are. Oklahoma's still a solid team, and it was at least on a neutral field compared to losing at home. Like I said earlier, Texas is only 3 because they had to put Alabama in. They can't go, we'd have to ignore the head-to-head if we don't put Texas in.
Mm-hmm. Dude, did y'all see also, man, when I don't know if y'all noticed this, but every time behind Kirk Herbstreit, he's got the helmets there, the top 4.
They're always
and when I saw it on Sunday, I was just about to text. I was driving, getting back home. But I was just about to text Dustin and be like, trash it all. Trash all everything in the drafts. Trash it, brother. This mother.
He's clairvoyant.
Already got the top 4 teams up there. And I love the whole, we don't know. We all know.
God.
All of them know. Everybody knows. It should be no shocker to anybody. And I love, too, also ESPN's social media just eating every bit of it up. They're just eating.
They had the Isaiah Thomas meme ready to go, and I was ready to throw my phone at somebody. I was so mad at that. Oh, my God.
Need to go back through those 6 playoff shows and see if the helmets are right every single time, because
for the most part they match up. Yeah.
In that clip that he just showed, I'm pretty sure it was right for that week.
It was.
Yeah, it was. But I'm gonna go and find it here. I'll find it. You can't hide.
So now
it's just
10 minutes more week by week.
Just a slap in the face to what we call a team sport. This isn't a quarterback versus quarterback sport. I get Jordan Travis went down, but you look at Florida State's offense, still littered with guys that are going to be playing in the NFL. We've already talked about the defense. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. Multiple guys from that unit are going to be playing professional football in 2024. This was a team that had 3 consecutive wins to end the regular season and the conference championship game by 3 different quarterbacks. I mean, that's the epitome of a team for them to go out there with Tate Rodemaker, went on the road against UF, cover the spread, by the way, and then do it the next weekend where, we haven't had any availability with the players yet this week, but hoping that we can learn how soon did they know that Brock Lynn was going to be forced in there for his first career start. I have to imagine, it was maybe the middle of the week or maybe even right up before that game, whenever it was announced on ESPN and everything that Tate Rodemaker would be unable to go. But a true freshman, first start, he's only played 2 significant snaps in his college career, goes out there in the ACC championship. I know he didn't have a good game, but the guys around him stepped up and helped guide the team to victory, where they once again cover the spread. So we're talking about an elite team, not just one player, a team. And for those guys to get disrespected and held out like that, and I think we all kind of know, we'll talk about later, how it's going to end here in the Orange Bowl. We're seeing guys hit the portal, and Johnny Wilson opted out. I don't think he'll be the last player to do so. It's just unfortunate for it all. You had the apex there on Saturday night, everyone celebrating there on the field in Charlotte, and 12 hours later, the bottom falls out.
Yeah, I think it's a slap. You said it's a slap in the face. I think it's a disgrace to competitive sports as a whole. You want to talk about stories or, storylines. Michigan was trying to rally the team behind a head coach, the fact that their head coach couldn't coach a few games, and everyone was eating it up. They said, this team's got grit, this team's got heart, they're figuring out ways to win. Isn't it more of an impressive story that here's Florida State, who loses their definitive guy? Here's the backup. He gets it done. He goes down. Here's the third guy. He gets it done. I mean, isn't that like Hollywood doesn't write movies?
You would think
better than that. And yet here we are punishing this team for the exact thing these movies are made of. I think it's a disgrace that they discounted this team in a room before they allowed them to go out there and prove that they could, hang with the best, something that they've proven all season long already. I think competitive sports is the nature of competitive sports always surrounds that unpredictability, and to try and predict everything to the minute detail and then say, you know what, just because we think that's going to happen, you don't get that chance. That's not what games are about. Any games of chance, So
what kind of message has been sent to Florida State's players and Florida State's coaching staff to do everything right the whole season, to overcome all of the adversity in their path, to get this team through an undefeated regular season and a 13-0 record for the first time since 2014? And this is what they're left with. I mean, imagine the guys on this team, they're going to come back next year. Does this change the mindset at all of Florida State? You've really got to wonder. I mean, I've got to imagine that the last couple of days have been really tough for, everybody involved from this program, not only the fans, obviously, but players, staff, coaches, families around the team. Just everybody. It's been devastating. So you've got to wonder, what's the after effects going to look like here moving forward?
It really is unbelievable. I know we've said it a few times, but the committee had a very easy decision. I know we've said people have said they've had a tough decision. They had a very easy decision. Put in 3 undefeateds, put Texas in, honor the head-to-head. That's the easy decision. That's the correct decision. And people, like you just said, Florida State did everything they possibly could and still didn't get in. That's been another big arguing point for me is, what do you want? What could you have asked of Florida State to possibly be better? Because you can't control injuries. You can't control some of these other stuff. They just continue to win games. That's what they can control. If you keep an Alabama out, you can point and go, beat Texas and you're in. Or if you keep Texas out, you can point and go, beat Oklahoma and you're in. It's very simple. It's a very simple solution to all of this. And what the committee has done at this point is saying, it doesn't matter if someone gets hurt. They're not as good, clearly. It doesn't matter that they're going to get a month to practice and get used to playing with the first team.
And get healthier, too.
We've seen what this team is. Yeah. Get healthier as well.
A lot of guys dinged up.
College football has been famous for some of these, backup third string guys leading teams to success. We've seen it with Doug Flutie with Boston College in the 80s. We've seen it with Cardell Jones in 2014. This is not new to college football. It's not like we haven't seen it before. We've seen backups have success. That's why college football is college football. It's why we all loved the sport. I don't know that we can say love anymore. Like with this kind of logic, the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles wouldn't have gotten in the playoffs because Carson Wentz got hurt in week 14 and Nick Foles struggled the last 3 weeks.
Shouldn't have played. Yeah,
Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the sport, got his start because Drew Bledsoe went down.
Yeah, it's frankly unbelievable. I know I'll be going to be saying unbelievable a lot, but it really is.
Shoot, Troy, send us that article or wherever that said Charlie Ward wants full access to the College Football Playoff Committee. That's an article right there. That's a quick hitter. But I saw Charlie after the game, though. He was very ecstatic, but the next day probably not so happy. But he was down there on the field celebrating.
I'm curious to know what you guys think because I think a few people have called for it. At least today I saw. I forget where it was. And then Charlie Ward right there. What about the transparency of this process? Because the AP poll, we know exactly who votes where. Coaches poll, same deal. The transparency behind the BCS is left to be debated, but at least we know it's some sort of computerized program. What do you think about transparency needing a place in this process with the committee?
I think, especially in something like this, where clearly they have this much power, should there be transparency? Yes. Will we get it? I don't know that we will, because I don't know if what they use to vote on keeps track of who votes for what. So unless each committee is going to honor exactly what they voted for, I don't know if we'll ever get that.
Sorry, I was just looking for that the Charlie Ward interview there, but that's some content for tomorrow. But I wanted to go to, and this kind of transition us out, and we can still, of course, keep discussing, but recruiting-wise, I keep seeing a lot of questions in here, and we also do have a donation. We need to jump in here from Corey Hall, and we're going to get to some of the opt-outs, really just one so far that we've seen from Johnny Wilson not playing in this Orange Bowl game against Georgia, which is even crazy to think of. Just to say, if you were to say that offseason and tell me that you're going to face Georgia, but not face for a college football playoff game, this wouldn't be a college football playoff game. You'd be facing them in the bowl game. It just would be like, what the are you talking about, buddy?
What? Hey, but we're somehow still better than them, even without our quarterback. So
it's wild, yeah. Still
make that make sense.
Still above them somehow. But what does this do, do you think, to recruiting, Dustin? To you're in this world heavily. What do you think this tells to recruits? What do you think Mike Norvell has to tell these players? Really big time class coming in. What do you tell them when they're going to be preached? Come to the SEC. You'll actually be able to play in the college football playoff. That's all they've got to say. That's all they've got to say. You can fight for a national championship. You can't go play in the ACC. You're not going to go. Well, now you got 12 teams, but.
That's what he's telling him. He's like, well, it's going to 12. It's going to 12
now. Then they're like, well, what about if we have 1 or 2 losses, coach? Like, are we really think they'll put us in? We got a big enough brand. We're going to bring enough ratings in, coach. But still, nonetheless, though, it's still an ACC problem, Like, what does that do for you in exposure as being a recruit and you want to come in and have a solid career and you want to make it to that next level? But for some of these guys, the big thing, they want to get a ring. There's a reason why Jared Verse came over to Florida State. He was thought that he'd have as being the program as it is, and this is still Florida State University. Don't get it wrong, but you was expected to come in here and fight for a national championship or in a college football playoff berth if he went undefeated 13-0 this season, won his ACC championship like he was told. That would be enough to get in.
No doubt, it's a really tough situation to kind of have to grapple right here before the early signing period. I think 2 weeks away from today or so, recruits around the country are going to be putting pen to paper, and now Florida State having to do some damage control. We're seeing on social media Mike Norvell and the coaching staff currently traveling around the country, meeting with commits and still some uncommitted remaining top targets, things of that nature. And yeah, doing damage control. I've had some recruits actually, not going to name any names, but one of them I was talking to, kind of annoyed on how they did dirty. My heart hurts for real. And that was actually from an uncommitted recruit that is considering Florida State. And a couple other guys who got our recruit reactions out on the site from the ACC championship, but I added a couple in there that actually came in after the college football playoff, and there were people saying they deserved the college football playoff invite, couldn't believe that they were left out of the field, and just things of that nature. So I think recruits, if anything, right now are feeling pretty bad for Florida State, because I think normally whenever you're talking to these recruits, they're more level-headed than a lot of college football fans. And it's kind of impressive, when you're talking about these guys that are 16, 17, 18 years old, still in high school, and they kind of see the game how it is. And I think a lot of them understand that Florida State, frankly, got screwed on Sunday, and they feel pretty bad for the coaching staff and everybody.
Maybe if they didn't have such a pansy of a commissioner in the ACC,
so
maybe they could have gotten in, because we saw Sankey go on College Game Day, stay on his soapbox, and beg for SEC to get in the playoffs. Sunday, after the playoffs are announced, we don't get a statement. We get a text of a screenshot, or a screenshot of a text from Jim Phillips.
Almost like a notes app, almost.
That was 6 sentences, and I can actually read the whole thing because it's that short. It's unfathomable that Florida State, an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, was left out of the college football playoff. Their exclusion calls into question the selection process and whether the committee's own guidelines are followed, including the significant importance of being an undefeated Power 5 conference champion. My heart breaks for the talented FSU student athletes and coaches and their passionate and loyal fans. Florida State deserves better. College football deserves better. It's a weak-ass statement.
No threats.
Weak-ass statement from Jim Phillips. And
multiple words I want to say, but I can't. But no threat. Nothing at all.
You can say whatever you want to say.
I don't know which one you're going to say. I think mine was going to be pretty bad, but I can't say
That's
that.
fine.
And this is far.
No, there's a word before there's a really bad word before just a regular kind of bad word.
I want to hear it.
I can't.
And it's far from the biggest. It's far from the biggest miscalculation the ACC has had this weekend. Because I don't know if people saw my post on Twitter. The ACC had no idea what they were doing on Selection Sunday when it came to bowl games. They just thought Florida State's going to be in the playoffs, which, in fairness, we all did, but they didn't prepare for if they weren't. They had it ready for Louisville to go to the Orange Bowl, and they had all the following games lined up. Nothing else is going to happen. Florida State misses, so Florida State is out, so they're shoved in the Orange Bowl. That just knocks everybody out of everything pre-planned that they had. And it ends up that Notre Dame, who they are responsible for fighting for a bowl game, where they go for their college bowl game is decided by a fucking hat draw. They drew their name. They drew a bowl game out of a hat to decide where Notre Dame was going. What are we doing?
Elementary school fucking ticket giveaway.
That's what happens when you don't fully join the conference. Should have just lit that hat on fire and said you're not going to any bowl.
Well,
we should change it to rock, paper, scissors.
Honestly. But what it came down to was there was 3 bowl games, and I'm trying to find exactly which bowls it was. I know it was
the Bad Boy Millers Bowl that Miami's in on a Thursday at 2 p.m. Are Miami fans going to be taking off work to watch that one?
It was the Duke's Mayo Bowl. It was the Duke's Mayo Bowl, the Pinstripe Bowl, and the Sun Bowls. Were the 3 bowls that were the next tier down that were decided between teams. And the teams were UNC, Miami, and Notre Dame. Obviously, all 3 of them are going to go, yeah, we want Notre Dame. We didn't even know they were going to be an option. Of course we want Notre Dame. So they all threw their name in. But if you go back to this, I guess it's technically the Pop-Tart Bowl now. The Pop-Tart, the Gator Bowl, and the Holiday Bowl, they were told Notre Dame was off the table. You're not allowed to pick those. You're not allowed to pick Notre Dame. So I don't know what the hell the ACC was doing. Literally all Sunday.
Mm-mm.
You get a weak-ass statement from Phillips. They don't know where teams are going in a bowl game until 5 p.m. when everybody else has already decided by that point. I cannot wait to get out of this conference soon enough. I don't care if it's the Sun Belt. I don't care if it's Division II. I don't care if it's Florida State 8A. Get us out of the ACC ASAP, please.
I think – go ahead, Dustin.
I concur. You're here.
Dude does not have any idea what he's doing. I mean, he looked pissed off whenever he was giving over the trophy to Mike Norvell on the stage after the game.
He should be sucking Mike Norvell's ball.
He should have been.
He should have been. Because this is the biggest. This is carrying. You're back to carrying. You're back to carrying the league. You're back to carrying your conference. Who gives? have fun sucking off Dabo. It's so much fun. He God lover. You save all Christ Almighty. But
I think
Mike Norvell just saved your conference, buddy, and this big brand that brought all your ratings is back. You should be sitting down on your knees and loving. You should hand that on your knees to Mike Norvell that Florida State is back carrying this conference. Because if it wasn't Florida State, you wouldn't be anywhere. Because Dabo, now he's going to try out the transfer portal here and there, but he's not going to find the same success accelerated like Florida State is, like it has now, and the resume that they built to be able to bring in transfers. Like they now can bring in a very good, talented veteran starting quarterback, which we'll probably see going into the 2024 season. This offseason, Florida State's going to bring in a highly talented quarterback, and they'll be able to do that for years to come. Clemson's just going to result on whatever they do in the recruiting. If things don't work out, then it's not. But Florida State's going to stay on the top tier, definitely if it's at the top two teams no longer having divisions as well.
I just think it's wild that he didn't put out a statement right there after the game. And how was he not on a national TV spot battling for Florida State to get in after all the propaganda that's going around? It's just wild that he just kind of sat around, twiddled his thumbs, waited until Florida State was left out of the playoffs, and was like, shit, let me put 3 sentences together real quick.
Right. Shouldn't the warning bells have gone off in his head the moment Greg Sankey was taking to the streets to proclaim their superiority? Shouldn't that have triggered something in his mind to say, hey, listen, I have an entire arm of the ESPN network as well. Why don't we leverage that to try and fight this, their campaigning, fight fire with fire. You put us into this deal with the grant of rights, and you put us into this media rights deal so that you could create the ACC network. Why not use it?
Not only did he release a weak statement, it took 45 minutes to get released. I didn't get that email from the ACC until 1 o'clock. The rankings came out like 12:15. I don't know what he was doing, and I cannot wait to get out of this conference. And I see you in the comment, Miami fan. Maybe if you weren't so bad, Florida State would be in the playoffs. Maybe if Florida wasn't so bad, Florida State would be in the playoffs right now. Just say it. Just saying.
And to punish Florida State, because a lot of you are scroll around the internet right now, everyone's saying, well, don't play such a weak schedule. What do you want us to do about it? We spent the entire offseason saying we're trying to get out of this conference. I mean, not even just exploring every opportunity on the field. We exhausted everything to try and give us the best shot to get into the playoff. And what, you're going to punish us because we're stuck? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Going back to the decision itself, Brian Kelly made a comment in a presser either today or yesterday, and he said something along the lines of, "You're splitting hairs between the 4 and 5. You're splitting hairs. If you're truly splitting hairs, shouldn't the hair you split be the win-loss record? It shouldn't be anything other than that. I mean, so to say you should have played better people, I call BS. I call BS. We exhausted every sort of opportunity we could have, and we made it very clear during the offseason, listen, we'd be out of this conference tomorrow playing all of you guys if we could.
And what else could Florida State do? They scheduled a top 10 opponent on the road, and we're the only team to hold Jaden Daniels, limit him at all, really, throughout the entire season. A guy
Heisman
who might win the Heisman.
Little trophy or something like that.
I mean, he's been absolutely ridiculous this season outside of one game. And
Adam Poehler owned him.
His touchdown pass in that game came against third-string true freshman.
Garbage
at
time.
The very end of it. Florida State went on the road and beat Clemson in Death Valley, the only team that's done so this season and one of the only teams to do so in the last decade. I mean, you can count the number of teams on your hand, I believe. They can't really help that the other teams on their schedule, like Miami underperformed, UF underperformed. Louisville lost the week before playing Florida State. If Florida State gets a top 10 Louisville in the AC championship and wins 16-6, are they in?
I don't think
Duke was a solid squad until Riley Leonard went down. I mean, that's just an unfortunate, circumstance there for them.
Duke had one loss coming into Tallahassee. I mean, what are you supposed to do that Riley Leonard's leg got
Mike Elko, who just got hired in the SEC at Texas A&M, their next big boy head coach up there in College Station.
And how many teams did Florida State play against that are going to make a bowl? Because they beat more bowl-eligible teams than any FBS team in the country. But we're sitting here talking about FSU's strength of schedule. I mean, it doesn't.
But again, we shouldn't even have to. It boils down to something way simpler, right? There was a zero.
But they got screwed. Yeah.
There was a zero in the loss column, and the two teams that are in 3 and 4 already played each other. I mean, like Austin said, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer, and there's no other way to rationalize it other than to say they picked who they wanted, and they made Jordan Travis the scapegoat for that decision, which is
all they relied on.
Disgusting.
Since we're talking about schedules, I feel like none of us have poked a hole in Alabama's schedule yet. So let me do that. Let me go ahead and do that for you. Did you know every single ranked team they played this year was at home? Ole Miss was at home. Texas was at home. LSU was at home. And there was one other one. I already forgot it. Tennessee, which I don't count Tennessee as a ranked team. Let's be completely honest. It's a joke that they're a top 25 team.
Embarrassing year for them.
They're non-conference. Texas, they lost by 10. USF, it was 10-3 with 5 minutes left in that game. Yeah. Middle Tennessee State and Tennessee Chattanooga.
But
Florida State did.
They showed
Florida
growth.
State did everything they could to schedule tough non-conference. Alabama did the exact opposite. They played the Texas game. Cool, you lost. What else are they doing? They're not doing anything. And it was a pretty bad year for the SEC. And you look at those games that Alabama didn't play in the ranked games, it took everything they had in them to hang on to that Texas A&M game. And Jimbo Fisher was doing everything he could not to win that football game. It was the least competitive game I've ever seen. They were up 24-6 over Arkansas and then got lazy, and Arkansas almost came back and won that game 1-3. Kind of reminiscent to the Boston College game, if you want to think about it. But that game was at home for Alabama, not on the road like it was for Florida State. And then it took the miracle of all miracle, 4th and 31 plays, for them to beat a bad Auburn team that got blown out by New Mexico State 2 weeks ago. It wasn't like that was in October or September. That game just happened.
Was that Auburn's revenge for 2013?
If Auburn catches a punt or has half a brain cell on that final play, Auburn wins that football game. It took every miracle Alabama had left in them to win that football game. And then they go beat Georgia, who I don't even think had Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey in that game. I could be wrong. But it's not strong of a schedule.
They didn't have a fully healthy Brock Bowers. Yeah.
So it's not as strong of a schedule as people are making it out to be. I keep seeing 5th strength of schedule. I would love to play every ranked team I play at home this year. That'd be amazing. I would love to play Vanderbilt and Tennessee and Texas A&M every year. That'd be amazing.
Do people think like strength of schedule some permanent immovable statistic, right? I mean, how do you not factor in how well the conference is doing that year? The ACC was 6-4 against the SEC. The SEC had an under 500 record against Power 5 non-conference opponents. I mean, how do you factor in strength of schedule and don't even look at the overall strength of how that conference is performing that year? Everyone unequivocally agrees that the SEC had a down year. Great. Why are we valuing them still just as high? Because we're working off some preconceived notion that it just means more? No, that's not how this works. If they're having a down year, then they don't get valued as high. It's simple math.
Math turned into money.
Yeah, no. The only math that mattered was the bottom line.
Very quickly did it turn into money. It's a shame. I don't get it at all. We've all had the argument of best versus most deserving and whatever else. Even if we're going by 4 best, I don't know if Alabama's one of the 4 best teams this year.
But all of that controversy around best versus most deserving, it didn't matter at the end of the day anyway, because they just pick who they wanted.
Yep.
And to me, it felt like more of a decision like, listen, these are the 4 teams we want. Let's create justifications to explain why we left Florida State out. Why, I'm sure Georgia fans are just as upset, right? I mean,
I don't know about just.
I mean, not just. Okay, they're upset. They're upset. You have 1 loss. It's the very last game of the year, and it was by 3. I mean, what do you point to? What do you point to in this situation?
Coaches poll too. Florida State went up a spot to number 3. AP poll at number 4, and college football playoff
BCS number 4.
Put them at number 5.
And that
Yeah.
margin was slim in the BCS between 3 and 5. Like, it was all very close. I think they were separated by less than, what would that be, a hundredth of a point? If I'm doing my decimal places correctly from middle school and high school. It's been a while. But it was a slim margin. Like, it wasn't like it was that Alabama was far in front of Florida State in the BCS. And, to this day, I still don't understand why they didn't make the BCS the playoff system. Just have the BCS decide the top 4. It takes away all bias. Tweak some things in the computations here and there. Like, I think head-to-head needs to matter a little bit more in the BCS. But other than that, for the most part, the BCS did a fairly good job of getting the correct 2 teams at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't always perfect, but nothing ever is, and it's far better than what we've got now.
I mean, people were clamoring for a playoff not because the BCS way of ranking teams was so horrible. It was the fact that it was only 2 teams, and people sometimes felt that 3, 4, 5 maybe should have gotten a chance. I think creating the committee just, it got rid of something people didn't totally have an issue with, and it created a laundry list of issues. That person up there said collusion is illegal. I think it goes back to, I think it was a board member for Florida State said when they were having that meeting about trying to exit the conference that we can't keep thinking about college sports as just extracurricular activities anymore. College football is big business. So a decision like this, if they end up finding this one day, collusion behind the scenes affecting something with this much financial impact, totally feels illegal. And I think that's why everyone feels so unjust and so wronged by this decision.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to continue to have this discussion throughout the next couple of weeks. Florida State doesn't play in its bowl game until December 30th. They'll be playing at 4 p.m. against Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs, which, man, if you would have told me earlier in the season that they'd be facing Georgia, man, I knew it'd be a pretty damn competitive battle, but 2 big-time brands going at it, and we'll be down there to cover that one in Miami in a few weeks. So we'll have our full thoughts on that matchup, but I want to get into some transfer talk, which has been pretty heavy over Twitter almost just a couple of days after Florida State won their ACC championship. I'm going to start naming off some guys here that have officially actually entered the transfer portal. Bless Harris, Florida State's offensive tackle. Daughtry Richardson, a young Florida State offensive lineman, also entering the NCAA transfer portal. Quashawn Sapp, someone that was getting some backup reps here and there, youngster at the center position. He's entering the transfer portal. Marquiston Douglas, which we'll discuss here in a minute on that. Florida State's tight end, kind of 2-3 there this season. AJ Duffy, Florida State quarterback. CJ Campbell, Florida State running back. Preston Daniel at that tight end position. Dylan Brown Turner, a true freshman linebacker. And then Winston Wright Jr., who left the program early in the season. But these gentlemen have officially entered the transfer portal. And then there is some drama on the Twitter webs. Feels like last year a lot. And one of the big names here, obviously, is with Pat Payton, Florida State star defensive end, opposite side of Jared Verse, who's been an absolute playmaker throughout this last stretch of the year for the Seminoles, tweeted that he was intending on entering the transfer portal, but since then has been deleted as of today. Something to monitor. And Ayabame Tafasi also announced that he's going to be entering the transfer portal, but not official yet, gentlemen. First off, let's jump right into AJ Duffy here, and we'll kind of go through maybe Douglas, and that's about it, really. And then we'll go into Pat Payton. But AJ Duffy in the transfer portal, I don't think this is much of a surprise to anybody. Dustin, you've been at practice. You see him more than anyone here. But just going off of what I saw last year practices and hopefully seeing a progression from him, and then also seeing Brock Glenn get third team reps over him, you just kind of got the notion that that was it for Duffy and Tallahassee.
The writing was kind of on the wall there whenever they started Brock Glenn over a guy who had already been with the program for a whole season. So, didn't work out for Duffy in Tallahassee. We'll see if he's able to find somewhere and earn more playing time elsewhere.
Yeah, very simple. Once you saw Brock Glenn getting the snaps over him, that we all accepted that he was no longer going to be a part of this team.
Mm-hmm. Then also Marquise Douglas also entered the transfer portal, and this one might have been a little bit more of a surprise, but maybe understandable due to the recruiting and what you've got in Landon Thomas coming in. Who's going to be a big-time factor in Florida State's offense under Mike Norvell moving forward. But still, Marquise Douglas, someone a big-time fan favorite, really reliable, kind of was a quarterback's go-to at some points throughout his career. Definitely having a big change in his body from last season, changing up during that offseason, and really became a nice factor in that offense where I think defensive coordinators kind of forgot about him at times. Definitely when you have a guy like Jaheim Bell there, South Carolina transfer to tight end that came in and has had some big time plays for Florida State, but wasn't healthy throughout the rest of the season. What do y'all think about Marquise Biscuit as this tight end room goes into 2024 specifically?
A little surprised about this one. Marquise Douglas, obviously a guy who's been in this rotation now for 2 consecutive years and had some really positive moments, not only as a receiver, but also really helping Florida State out there in that blocking game. And yeah, I think this season, you're bringing in the 2 transfer tight ends, Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock. Those 2 guys have assumed the biggest roles on offense. And you look at Marquise snaps this season compared to last year, only was on the field about half the time, went from over 400 snaps in 2022 to just 210 this season, whereas Morlock and Jaheim Bell both had 450 plus. So he just didn't get as much playing time. And you've got to wonder if maybe potentially bringing those guys in from the portal, then seeing his role fall off a little bit, kind of gnawed at him a little bit with what he's been able to come back from throughout his career at Florida State. Had a heart ailment early on in his career that limited him, was able to overcome that, and then now, become a consistent face in this lineup. But he's going to be someone, that's going to pick up some interest in the transfer portal. We've already seen Arizona State and old friend Kenny Dillingham extend a scholarship there. So Marquise Douglas, someone that can be productive and have success at the FBS level, and definitely rooting for the guy. He's a good kid.
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise. You're looking at next season. You're like, Morlock's clearly tight end 1, and Biscuit would have been tight end 2. But clearly he wants a bigger role, and I don't really blame him for it. Like you're saying, he saw his snaps go down, and I thought it was pretty telling that even as Jaheim Bell was clearly dealing with injuries the latter half of the season, Biscuit didn't really play as much as we thought he would have. Really in the last month of the season, the only time I remember on the field was that touchdown against Pitt. And
yeah,
he's a good player. He really is. And, even now looking at that tight end room, losing Bell, you're going to have Morlock though. And there's some other names there that you're like, I don't know how good I feel about these guys being on the roster next year between Jackson West and Brian Courtney. You would have liked to have an experienced guy there.
Jarrell Powers, baby. Jarrell Powers. Can't forget about Jarrell Powers. I'm high on Jarrell.
Yeah,
Biscuits. Yeah, I know. Understand. There's no experience there that he has, or not from anybody in that room behind those guys that we saw this year.
I mean, Biscuit leaving, it strikes a chord, right? We talked about it offline a little bit. Like, great dude, love him, great culture guy for the program. But I think it's a testament to the nature of where the game is at relative to the transfer portal these days, and I don't think he'll struggle to find the right fit for him if that's truly what he wants.
Could that potentially be a sign Jaheim Bell's contemplating coming back for another year?
He's already accepted that Senior Bowl invite, so I guess unless he doesn't show up there.
Yeah, I wonder how much that really ties you down. If the Senior Bowl, if you say yes or no, if you have to sign on a dotted line. I don't think so.
Not very much.
Something to watch. Jaheim, to me, guys, hasn't been healthy for the last month and a half, maybe month,
really
at least a month, man. You can just tell.
Since the Pitt game, because he did have a pretty big role in the Pitt game, but after that, Miami, he didn't get much touches. Florida, he didn't get merit. He had a couple pop passes, but that was really the only time we saw him. And that seam pass, which was Tate's one good pass of the night. But yeah, other than that, we just haven't really seen him much down the stretch.
Yeah. Hey.
I'd love it if it happened.
FSU fans need optimistic things to look forward to. So that was something good that you brought up there, Dustin. And then break their hearts here, and tomorrow probably when he announces he's going to the NFL.
And then everyone's going to come back and say, "Dustin, how could you?
How did you break my heart, you asshole?"
If we're being super
journalism with a lowercase j,
super hypothetical, a tight end room potentially of Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, and Landon Thomas coming in as a freshman. So, there's some excitement there for sure.
I feel good.
Listen, it's a far stretch from where we used to be in the tight end room. No disrespect to those guys, but
Oh yeah.
I've said it.
It's nice it's nice to be at this point where now you're bringing in some really talented tight ends where you don't have to develop for almost 3 years, to be honest. Let's go talk about CJ Campbell because he's a player that needs to be talked about. He deserves a lot. Actually started in this game in the ACC championship.
Yeah.
A walk-on as a running back. Saw 22 out there, but just throughout his career, a phenomenal kid, someone that was just coached really well by Coach Yak. And he's going to have a great opportunity wherever he goes. Obviously, it thins up a little bit there in that running back room with also Trey Benson moving on as we're expecting. But, CJ Campbell, great kid, and is going to get a really, really good opportunity. I think how Trayshawn Ward did from a standout kind of university, and they'll be able to utilize him. But really special playmaker, and it's a jam-packed running back room, and you've got some players coming in. You've got Cam Davis, who is going to take up a lot of playing time from some of these guys.
This is what the transfer portal is really all about. CJ Campbell, a guy that joined Florida State as a walk-on and has become a productive member of that running back room, getting into the back end of the rotation, contributing across special teams during his time at Florida State. We've never really gotten clarification. I'm assuming, whenever Trayshawn Ward was promoted to scholarship after starting as a walk-on, that was a big PR thing for Florida State to put out. So I would imagine if CJ Campbell had gotten the same honor, that would be something that would be have been publicly recognized. So CJ Campbell has just continued to be a valuable member of this team. And, now him showing what he's worth, he's not able to get on scholarship really at Florida State right now, just because that backfield is so crowded, so many quality bodies, and you've got 2 more guys coming in that are going to be taking up scholarships on that 2024 roster. So this is a chance for him, a guy that has proved his worth at the FBS level, to enter the portal and get a scholarship somewhere and also a larger role. And we've already seen, since he got in the portal just over 24 hours officially, already has some interest from programs such as Florida Atlantic, I believe Arkansas State, UMass. So some FBS programs there, Valdosta State, FAMU, and there was at least one more that has offered him so far. But CJ Campbell picking up some interest, and I really believe, when you're talking about the transfer portal and you have these guys who are walk-ons who come in and prove themselves but can't get on scholarship, they can go somewhere else and get that opportunity to have their education paid for. I mean, that's what it's all about.
He's a good player, but when you're looking at a running back room next year of Lawrence Toafili, Keziah Holmes, Sam Singleton, Rodney Hill, Mekhi Danzy, and Cam Davis, it's not going to be a lot of carries in that group. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not trying to project anything. I wouldn't be surprised if one more guy ends up dipping from that room because there's so much talent. It's unbelievable how talented that room is.
It's ridiculous. Coach Yak is not going to have enough room.
What a testament to the program. That's the next walk-on guy to work his way up and get a chance elsewhere. It's a good story. Good reflection of what's going on in that program.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it does. Florida State has had a lot of walk-ins come in and get playing time, turn into potential starters, and then also to get some good opportunities outside of Florida State if they do intend on entering the transfer portal. And you can just tell, too, Mike Norvell has such a great relationship with these guys. And this back room, just like Reen saying here on YouTube, this whole running back room is going to be filled with some competition, which is going to be really fun to watch because it was really solidified there by Benson. But we saw a lot of Lawrence Toafili, but still nonetheless, Florida State is looking for their RB1 going into this 2024 season, and it's going to be iron sharpens iron there for Coach Yak and company. I want to go to the tweets here because some of these other guys kind of maybe Bless Harris.
Yeah, I think we should talk about him real quick.
Yeah, definitely for that.
Gotta talk about Bless.
I'll be honest.
Future there in that room.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't know Bless Harris still had eligibility. When I saw the announcement, I'm like, aren't you graduating? Or aren't you out of college eligibility? But it's pretty simple that he was expecting more playing time, and he got it the first 4 games. Then he was hurt the next couple of games against Virginia Tech and someone else. And then from there, his playing time just slipped. Like he'd see 20 snaps one game, then 1 snap the next, then 6 snaps and 21 snaps. And then he didn't even play against Florida. And Norvell is such a run-heavy play caller, and Bless Harris just isn't a great run blocker. He's a great pass protector, but he's not great in the road game. We've talked all year about how the counters and the powers were working as they should. I'm not that surprised.
Yeah, he had that year of eligibility left just since he got injured in 2022, the very first game of the season. So
yeah, I thought that's why he came back this year. That's just where my mind had gone, but clearly not. So,
but still, Bless, a valuable member of the program during his 2 years in Tallahassee, slated to be Florida State starting right tackle last year prior to that season-ending injury, and then this year. Had a couple of starts and was able to step in there. But like you said, Austin, playing time was a little bit inconsistent after that injury he suffered. I mean, pretty much played, I think, over 50 or 60% of his snaps there in the first 4 games. After that, a major drop-off. So I think it's unfortunate, when you look at this roster in 2024 and we've seen this offensive line get beat up throughout the season, it'd be great to have as many quality bodies as you can, but also understand how it's Bless Harris's final year of eligibility, and he probably wants to go somewhere where he's guaranteed a starting spot to get as much as he can on film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this, I mean, not to look so crazy ahead, but when we start getting to some of these camps too, when we get to spring, that Coach Atkins, he's got a big group, but I think he's really got to work on solidifying what his 5 guys are going to be moving forward. I think there's a lot of change around it, and it's worked for them so far, but I think just building consistency, because this offensive line group wasn't that consistent throughout the season. I understand guys are dinged up. Your central guy in the middle there with Maurice Smith was hurt for the majority of the latter half of this season, and he's been dealing with the injury since last year, honestly. But having a contingent 5 that you're throwing out there on a daily basis, and I understand, health concerns and all this kind of stuff happens, but that's something I'd like to see a little bit more solidified going into 2024. Because I think too, also trying to get guys playing time and such, but it's just tough to, after a while, communication, and definitely whenever you had the situation where you're throwing in multiple quarterbacks throughout the season, it's not easy to do. So, but yeah, Bless Harris, he is entering the transfer portal. And then the intentions of Pat Payton. See a couple questions in here about Pat Payton, but tweeted that he was going to enter the transfer portal, but that has been deleted. That was tweeted yesterday, late afternoon, and here we are. Pat Payton has not officially entered the transfer portal, but we've seen signs of this. This kind of happened last year, and we saw it kind of tumble once, we saw the battles in, getting these contracts done or getting this agreements done with some of these players and getting them money and being able to keep them at the university. And now just hearing a few things, Pat Payton's looking for a good amount of money to make a comeback. But maybe putting the price a little too high, to his, I guess, now former teammate. We'll see if Jared Verse plays, but maybe too close in the margins there of what Jared Verse got package-wise, deal-wise to come back for this 2023 season, gentlemen.
That's where we're at now in college football, where
free agency.
You can renegotiate after a good season and want more NIL money. And you have to think at the same time, we're dealing with 18 to 21, 22-year-old kids who maybe aren't always getting the best advice and making judgments based on an emotional whim. Remember, we're only 72 hours out from Florida State receiving the most devastating news that, this program has potentially ever received. That's a big thing for these guys to go through. And at the same time, a lot of these coaches are out on the road recruiting and not there with the team. And I just feel like tensions can get so high at these certain points. Guys can get frustrated. And we've seen some of it come through on social media the last couple of days. I don't think anything that we see a player put out on social media is an end-all, be-all. That it's just kind of a place to go out and vent. And, we'll see if Florida State is able to get this situation under control and keep Patrick Payton on the team, because they love Patrick Payton. Patrick Payton is someone homegrown at Florida State that this coaching staff has developed, and he's turned into a starter on a undefeated ACC championship team, a crucial member of the program, and someone who is going to be expected to be one of the best players in general on this roster in 2024. You remember over the offseason, whenever they had the press conferences, I believe in March or April for the game in Ireland, Patrick Payton was one of the guys that Florida State made available to talk that day. Obviously expecting him to be a member of the program moving forward, not only in the 2023 season, but at least another year. So he's someone that FSU values a lot, not just on the field, but also off the field. And I think that's one, they're not going to let him go without a fight.
And he's also, you have to keep in mind, he's close to that group of Josh Farmer and Terrell Jackson, who we saw play with it in the offseason a little bit last year. If they can't come to agreements with Pat Payment, are you seeing those guys enter as well? And now you're looking at a very thin front four. If that happens, I think it'll get done, but at the same time, you can't just give in and with these insanely high prices if what's being reported is true. At some point you have to set the standard of saying, hey, you're a great player, but we can't pay you more than Jared Verse, who's going in the top 20 of the NFL draft. Like, at some point that has to happen. But, like you said, you want to keep that homegrown talent. You want to keep the guys that you've developed. You don't want it to just be a roster full of transfers.
Yeah, I think, the striking difference is Verse, when he got that money last year, was already projecting to go in the first round anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they paid that money to a guy who was already getting that heat, and I don't see that same heat coming for Peyton this year. So, the numbers are there. What was it? 27 tackles, solo tackles this year, 6 sacks, 1 forced fumble, passes batted down. He's definitely a presence in the backfield. But man, different circumstance. I don't like the move. I think, how do you leave a program that has just sent 2 guys at your position to the league? I think there's a larger and more sustainable payday right around the corner. But again, like Dustin said, it's a testament to where NIL is at this year, or in the college game, and guys are gonna want to get what they can while you strike while the iron's hot, so they say, and that's just where we are.
Especially, they're seeing what the battle end is, but now that all these members have jumped on board, and I'm sure just like anybody else, they want to take advantage of that.
Hell yeah, I would. Absolutely. I don't think I'd get anywhere close to maybe even like a quarter of a bag, but
yeah, I'll take 1/4 of Jared Verse's salary, please.
His salary,
like a quarter, like a singular, like a
that might be all we're worth, honestly. That might be definitely on the field. Yeah, maybe we could work with any of the administrative staff, but now on the field, that's all we're worth practically. But yeah, I think it's a lot of quick things happening at once, man. A lot of quick things happening at once. You just, like you were just saying, Dustin, the coaches are on the road. They're recruiting. A lot of things kind of stir up whenever the coaches aren't in town. They'll be back, I think, this weekend or something. Things will kind of simmer down into, we've seen this before, but you don't want to let it linger into, though, like we were talking about Joshua Farmer, Daryl Jackson too, Shaheem Brown too. You want to have him back as well. DJ Lundy, you got to have him back in that linebacker room, which is thin on experience. There's just a lot of things. Sit back. Let's look at the numbers. It's just too many things happening at once, and it's easy to get pissed off. Everybody's pissed off right now. Everyone is. And
let me ask you, because I saw a comment like this in the comments just now. Mm-hmm. Is how long does doing stuff like that, this frequently continue to play, right? Especially with someone like Mike, who's big on culture and big on buy-in and big on the work. How often can you continue to go back to the negotiation table and call for more money before someone says, you know what, I get the feeling that this isn't the program for you. Kick rocks,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Norvell can say, if you're just going to keep on, you're one to push for, let's just say, you just want more NIL money. You want that. You want to feel like you should get paid this much per off of, maybe looking at other players across the league and such. If you want to keep pushing it, I'll just go in the transfer portal and find another one of you. Plain and simple, like I've done the last 3 years. There it is. That's all I kind of need to say, because then at some point, because there's like you were saying, that question up there, does it hurt your team? Yeah, it starts creating a lot of question marks in there, which is really sucky because you just went on a 13-0 run. This culture is great and everything, but when money gets into it, which Florida State has done a good job, and the Battle's in, and a lot of other things there that do a good job of connecting these players to making money that they deserve. But at some point, though, how much are you just going to continue to deal with that until it starts messing up some stuff in your locker room? And at that point, then I think Norvell, we're done. We'll move on from here.
No, you can't be held hostage, on a year-to-year basis by moves.
And I hate to say it, but Pat Payton's not the best person to be saying this kind of stuff at his position because of what Florida State's been able to bring in the transfer portal and have one-year starters and go get paid in the first round. And like Jared Verse will do this upcoming draft as well.
Yeah, they're already looking at another D-end out there somewhere, right?
And D-ends are looking at Florida State.
Reportedly.
They offered the guy from Pittsburgh, Samuel.
And defensive ends
Logan
that aren't even in the transfer portal are
look, the portal just opened
JP
Monday.
has been able to do.
But we've seen this Florida State staff have discipline in these scenarios in the past. You think 2 years ago, Jarvis Brownlee being removed from the team during the spring, eventually ended up at Louisville. Even this spring, Derek McClendon and that whole situation with him eventually going to Colorado. Another time where we've seen this coach staff put their foot down.
Amarian Cooper too.
Yeah, I mean there were multiple guys really that went out the door to Colorado alongside McClendon, but I think this coaching staff they're going to know when the time is, when they have to put their foot down and say enough is enough. But at the same time, this is what this era has created, and it's something that you're going to have to grapple with.
Yeah, and this is a fan base to go and hit the panic button real quickly, but it's just, again, it's the nature of the game right now.
Mm-hmm. One I'm keeping a close eye on. I've been doing this since just hearing things. This was actually when I was at practice. This was when in spring camp. But Ayobami Tafase, someone who I think all of us here think highly of as just being someone on paper and just physicality-wise doesn't look like a true freshman. We've heard really good things about him. But it's still, it's not official yet that he's hit that transfer portal, but it's one that I would just continue to monitor, that maybe he doesn't potentially actually go into that and end up leaving the program. Just some things that need to be configured, not maybe on the NIL side, but just understanding it's more of a playing situation, playing time to me, at least from what just hearing things and being around the program.
Could really
but
use
you'd
him.
like that. You would love to have him you want to have him for 2024. You would love to have that added depth.
I mean, we know Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, and Dennis Briggs, likely Briggs, are all going to be heading out the door for the NFL following the season. I mean, depending on what happens with Joshua Farmer and Daryl Jackson, you're looking at potentially Malcolm Ray and Daniel Lyons as your two most experienced defensive linemen coming back in that interior next season, which, I mean, that would be crazy considering the depth that Florida State has had on the defensive line throughout this year. It's been a major to that defense, but keeping a guy around like Ayobami Tafase, especially when you look at the incoming recruiting class that Florida State currently has, that's a big prospect to have on your roster, and someone that has shown a ton of promising qualities. And if he can develop, has been banged up sometimes that have limited him during practice, and obviously just behind a ton of quality players in that interior right now, but someone that certainly has a bright future in front of him.
It's definitely one of those, what happens with the rest of the guys? Because if Farmer stays and Darrell Jackson stays, you can afford to lose a guy like Tafase and just develop the younger guys behind him. Let Malcolm Ray and Daniel Lyons take that next step up. If you lose those guys, that room becomes so weak so quickly, just with all the experience you're losing. And I know you mentioned it real quick, but Des Briggs could possibly get a waiver and play next season. So we'll see what happens there. But really depends what happens with the other guys first.
And I think with Fisk leaving and Lovett leaving and Briggs potentially, considering how often we rotated those guys through on that line, I mean, it seemed like it was frequently we were just throwing guys in there. He stands to, I think, staying another year, he stands to gain a lot of playing time next year, given how many departures there are potentially going to be. I mean, it's not like they don't rotate those guys in infrequently, you know?
Yeah. Like I said, that's nothing. I don't think it's NIL related. It's just things that just got to be talked to and figured out moving forward. And then let's talk about Johnny Wilson. News today broke that from Pete Thamel of ESPN that he is going to opt out of the Orange Bowl. He'll be playing in the Senior Bowl, but he is officially declaring for the NFL draft, a player that transferred from Arizona State, and Coach Ron Dugans did a really good job of developing and finding a scheme fit for him in this offense alongside, of course, with Mike Norvell, but made some big time plays for Florida State throughout his career in Tallahassee. And now is going to get a really unique opportunity in the NFL, which I'm really interested to see which offense is going to get him, because he's a special player and he's got the abilities. And one thing that he's going to have to work on, though, is consistency with his hands. But you see that natural gift that he has and a lot more speed. That's something that when going to practice, we saw right off the bat. I was like, damn, that boy can move for what his size he brings on the field. And he's done a really good job 2 yards after catch as well for his size. But yeah, Johnny Wilson won't be playing against Georgia for the Florida State Seminoles, but he'll be in the Senior Bowl and is officially headed to the NFL draft.
Obviously an inconsistent wide receiver at times, but just someone who is unique with the frame that he possesses and the catches that he's able to make when everything was clicking. Was really, really good for Florida State last year. You think back to that performance in the Cheez-It Bowl against Oklahoma, where he really showed all of his ability and what he can do. He's something special, but still has some things that needed to be developed, still needs to become more consistent as far as catching the ball and not letting the easy ones get away from him. You were hoping to see him improve on some of those qualities this year. Unfortunately, just those injuries, which, never confirmed, but seemed to be, he got 2 concussions and about a three-week span or so that kind of limited him there during the middle of the season. Only played in 10 of the 13 games. And I mean, really, if you want to say really like 8 of 13, because both those games where he's injured, he got knocked out there right after halftime. And that was unfortunate, but definitely a guy. He has a professional future ahead of him, and I think with him getting back healthy, getting a chance to go to the Senior Bowl, boost his stock, he's going to be someone that participates in that NFL Combine. Definitely think he'll be drafted there in the top 100.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people be like, he should stay. He should stay. I never really saw that happening. Everywhere you're seeing he's a top 100, top 80 player. It's day 2 pick, and there's no shortage of good receivers every year in the NFL draft. You just got to go when you can. And even despite missing 3 games this year, he was almost Florida State's leading receiver this year over Keon. I think he was only 20 or 30 yards behind him and 3 less games played. And he was by far Florida State's leading receiver last year, more than doubled Pokey Wilson. People are going to talk about the health, talk about the hands. He's a day 2 pick. That's what it is. I'm really curious to see how he tests in the Combine. I don't think any of us are expecting him to go out there and blow it away, but he moves really well for someone that's 6'7", 230 pounds. If he can find a way to squeeze in that mid 4.5 range, that's going to be a really, really good time for him. And he's got really good short area quickness, as we see on these hitches and these crossing routes. He's a lot more agile than you expect of someone of his size, and I'm not surprised by the decision whatsoever.
No, it doesn't come as a surprise. I think you can talk inconsistency all you want. Obviously, the only having 2 touchdown receptions this year jumps off the page a little bit. But again, Dustin commented how he, only really 8 games, only 9 less receptions than Keon Coleman this year, and a significant amount of less playing time. So, he has a knack for finding the ball. And at the end of the day, you can't teach size like that. You can teach him and refine his skills. You can't teach the frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone will utilize him there. He's just too much of a red zone threat, which, like y'all were saying, they're easy. Wide receiver in the NFL, it is a massive game changer for not just like an offense, but for a quarterback and success there. And then 2, also just as a team, it puts you in a really good spot. I mean, look at your team there. I mean, what's going on with Justin Jefferson now in Minnesota?
He's coming back this weekend.
He's coming back?
Mm-hmm.
It's only been 2 months.
I know.
See him back. It's been a while.
Your team failed me in my survivor pool, Austin.
I could have told you otherwise. You should ask me for advice first.
In the Bears game, come on, man. How could you guys?
There's nothing like the Vikings and find a way to blow a Monday night game against the Bears. It's historic.
Against a team that didn't score a touchdown.
Tough. Okay. It's all right, VZ. I didn't mean to really bring you through this, but
No, it's fine.
is
It's
entertaining
fine.
to watch.
But listen, I'm here to bash my Vikings. I'll do it anytime you want me to.
Oh man, but yeah, let's jump into some basketball here. You know, we've got plenty of weeks ahead before we have to really sit down and preview a Florida State versus Georgia game, which no one really wants to talk about yet. And there's much
nothing to preview.
a timeline
No one's
to
going to
talk
be playing their
about.
starters.
There might not be anybody there. Who knows? I mean, we might just be there by ourselves. And
I've got eligibility left. Just saying.
All right. Yeah, I know Dustin definitely doesn't. Dustin, no eligibility whatsoever, right? You might be pulling a Bless Harris, maybe potential.
No, it had to be a Demetri Manuel at this point.
Yeah, I had multiple season-ending injuries.
And the COVID year. Don't forget a COVID year.
Oh,
yeah,
that's a
I
good
gotta add
point.
that in there.
That's a good point.
Oh yeah, we all got a year.
Maybe I can come back.
Oh man, but like Shar's saying here on YouTube,
wow,
nobody talks about our basketball team. But if you're new to the channel, though, Dawson gives our rundown on basketball at the end of every episode. Also, too, if you're listening on audio versions on that platform as well. But yeah, let's talk about some basketball, and let's start off too with Cameron Fletcher, really scary injury, which you were there in attendance for.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about the games. I just feel so bad for Cameron Fletcher. He just announced yesterday that he's out with his second straight season-ending injury to the same knee, which we're assuming it's the knee. Florida State hasn't come out and said anything yet. I don't expect we'll hear anything until maybe Saturday when they play USF. Just sucks, man. I was there last year at Virginia when he tore his ACL. And, at the time, there was optimism that, it wouldn't be as serious as it ended up being with the torn ACL. This year, there was no chance. I mean, he had to be carried off the floor. Everyone was devastated in the locker room and in that back hallway. I just absolutely hate it for him. Less than a year after tearing his ACL at Virginia, I'm assuming it's ACL and some other stuff in the same knee 363 days later at North Carolina. A year ago we were thinking, could this be Florida State's best player? Tears his ACL, recovers in an amazing time frame. I mean, it was 9 months and he was back to full action. And I know Coach Ham. I've seen this argument. Oh, why did he come back so early? Coach Ham does not play people if there's any kind of doubt. I've seen him sit Raekwon Gray for just somewhat complaining about his knee when he woke up in the morning one time. If there was any doubt about his health in that knee, he would have sat him like we saw with Jalen Gainey to start this season. But Cameron Fletcher's a freak of nature, and he was healthy in 9 months and was able to play basketball again and, contributed at times this year. And I absolutely hate it for him. I'm so sad to see it go this way. And I know he's listed as a redshirt senior on the roster. Everyone was expecting him to get the medical redshirt for last year. At this point, I don't know if he's going to want to use it. You've had 2 season-ending injuries on the same knee, and who knows how bad the knee looks right now. So we'll see what happens, but I'm absolutely heartbroken for the kid.
It's just sickening because he worked his whole way back, and then not even a year later goes down again. And not even just for him. I mean, it's a terrible situation for him. But you go from the injury to Jordan Travis in football just a couple weeks ago, and then now you get to the basketball court and have another player suffer a terrible season-ending injury. I mean, it just sucks all the way around, especially with some of the promise that this Florida State team was beginning to show early in the year. And, you were hoping a guy like Cam Fletcher, just getting back from that original injury, as time continued to go on, he would get back further into a groove and be an important player for this team moving into conference play and the remainder of the year. And instead, just a meaningless injury once again saps it all away and sucks for the kid.
What do you think about that Georgia game, VZ?
It was brutal. I mean, Florida State was up 17 with less than 8 minutes left, I want to say. And, win probability was 99.3%. If you look at KenPom, it's the second lowest win probability of the season where the other team won. I was getting texts all night right before it going, yeah, this is what we expected. It came down to Florida State couldn't make shots in the first half. I know what I'll talk about the run in a second, but Georgia could not hit the broadside of a barn with a baseball from 2 feet away if they tried in that first half, but neither could Florida State. Both teams were standing in the middle of the ocean on a boat and somehow hitting land. Like, it made absolutely no sense. Once Baba Miller got fouled out, and I've even talked about this with some people at Carolina, once Baba got fouled out on a ridiculous call on a double foul where he had the ball and Georgia fouled him and somehow it's a double foul, I still don't understand it even after rewatching it. That changed the entire game because he's so key to Florida State's defense. And I know a lot of people haven't been thrilled with Baba Miller's play. He is so key to this defense, what he can do defensively with his versatility and his size and his length. He could shut down 1 through 5 by himself, and he's such a mismatch, coming off the ball, playing on ball, whatever. As soon as he fouled out, Georgia was able to just drive to the rim with not much resistance. Then Jameer Watkins fouls out as well, who had a poor game against Georgia, I will say that. But once he fouled out as well, it's like, oh man, who do we have out here actually that can play defense? And there's nobody that could stop the bleeding. That was my biggest concern coming into the season is who can score, who could put the ball in the basket. We know Darren Green can, and he did his part last week. I mean, he had, 21 points? He did everything required of him. Deontay Green has taken a massive step up. I can't believe how well he's played the last couple of weeks. But you don't have someone that can reliably get a bucket. Now, if the NCAA could get their head out of their ass and do something with Primo Spears, you'd have that guy. But they're playing without him right now, and it's Florida State should have never lost that game. If they're able to hit some shots in that first half, they walk out of that game with a 20-point win. But they kind of fiddled around the first half, couldn't make shots. They finally started to the start of the second half, and they completely faded.
And unfortunately, this is kind of starting to look like a trend because even though they were able to defeat Colorado, they were up a pretty decent margin there in the second half and kind of almost lost it down the stretch and had to go and pull it out in overtime. And then now we see you get out to a large lead against Georgia, fumbled away. Went on the road to Chapel Hill, and man, did they look good for about the first 30 minutes of that game. And North Carolina just goes on a wild run and runs away with it. I mean, didn't even really look close when you look at the final score, whereas what Florida State had been doing up double digits in that game. There's a lot of promise with this team, but they just got to learn how to finish and how to stop some of these opposing runs because it seems like whenever the opponent starts to get some momentum, they really struggle to get back into the game.
The biggest thing, well, there's a couple things. I talked about the shot making. The other thing is they just don't have an elite ball handler right now. We saw it against North Carolina where they were playing this unique 2-2-1 press and trapping as soon as the ball got in. Florida State doesn't really have the guy that can break those presses. We saw it a couple times. They passed the ball ahead to Deontay Green at half court, and then they had a little pitch off to Jalen Worley or Chandler Jackson or Baba Miller or whoever, but they couldn't get to it consistently enough to make it work. And, like you said, the first 27, 28 minutes against North Carolina, they're doing what you need to do to win on the road at North Carolina. You were hitting threes. You were limiting the offensive rebounds enough because obviously Carolina attacked the offensive glass like crazy. You were doing exactly what you needed there. But then the free throws started catching up to them, and that's where it started getting out of hand. That's where the run started coming from Carolina. You're not going to win many games when you're outshot 31-8 at the free throw line. And that's just what you have to expect when you go and play UNC or Duke in North Carolina. Like, they're going to get those advantages with the officiating that you're not going to get. And I'm sure some people are going to call me a salty Florida State fan or whatever, but it's just the case in the ACC. You're not going to get that advantage. I saw Armando Bacot twice, two-hand push someone in the back, get the ball and get an and one on a really tacky call. And I'm like, all right, we're being a little too ridiculous here. But, Florida State shot 12 of 28 from three, and Carolina, off the top of my head, I think was 5 of 22. That's a game you're supposed to win, but free throws killed them. That's really what it came down to there.
Gilly wants to give her take, obviously. I guess now since she's gotten TV fame, that now she just thinks she can just interrupt.
She's a big basketball fan. Shout out Gilly.
She is. She came in and she was ready to listen to VZ talk about basketball. She was yapping at the damn door. That's for dang sure. But, yeah, and then, the next couple of games coming up, you got South Florida, SMU. North Florida comes back to town. What a
Yeah,
time that was, Beezy.
The USF game Saturdays should not be much of a game. Yeah, I know what Florida State's looked like the last week, but Florida State beat Central Michigan by, what was it, 27? Something like that. Central Michigan beat USF in Tampa. So this should be a win. SMU game is going to be tough. SMU is a sneaky good team in the American. Luckily, that game's in Tallahassee, but as we've seen, that doesn't always mean what it did when I was there with the team. After that, non-conference is easy. The first few games of the ACC are doable between Wake Forest and Notre Dame, so there's a chance for them to gain some momentum. I'm not reading that comment.
Oh, there's three of them now.
I know. I hate this narrative. I absolutely hate this narrative.
For context, for our audio listeners, it's comments about Leonard Hamilton and this possibly being his last year.
It's just
not ready yet for that discussion.
It's not a discussion. It's just not. Let me just put it to bed right now. It's not happening. He's signed through 2025. He is too big of an icon in the sport to force out. He just is.
Well, they said about Bobby Bowden.
I get it. Trust me, I get it. But at least they had already had a coach in waiting to where they could do something with it. Leonard Hamilton is too much for the sport, too much for college basketball to force him out and go, yeah, we can go get somebody. It's just not happening. It's just not happening.
Man.
And Leonard Hamilton has said, until I come out and sit on the wrong bench, I'm going to be coaching basketball.
Well, someone might take that bench away from him.
I don't think you can realistically get rid of him. And I think part of it is the team hasn't been as successful last year. That's everybody's complaint, is he had one bad year. I think this team's still going to be above 500. And, are they in the discussion there in March? Probably not. But that's what Florida State is historically. They get to the tournament 1 out of every 5 years. We've been spoiled with Coach Hamilton with the run they had from 2017 through 2021. Absolutely spoiled. That's the best we'll ever hope for with Florida State.
That's what happens, though. The bar gets raised, and then the expectations change.
Which I get. And I have never seen a team have the injury run that Florida State had the last 2 years. I've never seen it. I've never seen a team with 13 scholarship players have 6 people available. I have never seen that. So I trust Coach Ham. I'm in the very few vocal minority right now. And at the end of the day, it comes down to making shots. They are getting looks for this team. Guys get cold sometimes. That's not always on the staff. So I could say a lot more.
When they're cold for 3 years.
It's not.
Get them a blanket? Or do you?
They've missed a lot.
Trust me, I've been as frustrated.
Could I made a few of them? Think I could make them?
I've been as frustrated as anybody with how bad the team has been last year.
The year before they weren't good. The year before,
no, but the year before, if you stop time after that Duke win, they're tied at the top of the ACC with 6-2. Then Malik Osborne gets hurt. Then who was it that was right after him?
Oh, so you're saying they need a new trainer too?
Well, they are. They're in the process.
They are getting new.
I don't want to share any secrets, but they are. I mean, like I said, I've just never seen a run of injuries like they had. So I'll give them time. I still firmly believe this team will be above 500 by the end of the year. Consider what we saw last year. I consider that a success. Then you look and see what you can do after the season and maybe find your way back in March for next year.
Damn it. We're already there. God dang it. We were just at the fun part of talking about basketball. And now
I know. I was so excited last week.
Ahead to next year.
I was so excited last week, but they just don't have the ball handling. And that's in college basketball, you win with ball handling and elite guard play. And Florida State just hasn't had it since Trent Forrest left.
It's crazy. They're probably 15 total game minutes last week from being ranked in the top 25, and now now we think their season might be over.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to be realistic about the outlet of the whole season.
Absolutely.
Like even when I saw the AP votes for Florida State basketball last week, I'm like, that's early.
Even you're like, interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to the women's soccer team though. They got the natty done. They took care of business for us. So
yeah, at least one undefeated football team on campus gets the chance to compete for it.
Yep.
Football team.
Yep.
Football.
Yeah, and then too, go back to 2020. What could have been for FSU basketball? I always will say, man, Leonard had a squad that year. And then
it's like I said on Twitter.
What could have been for 2023 Florida State football?
Yeah,
what could have been, right?
Hang another banner.
How I felt all day Sunday and most of the day Monday is exactly how I felt if the tournament got canceled in 2020. It was the same gut punch. Trust me, I get the argument. One was a global pandemic. One is a bunch of old dudes that took away an opportunity. But that's also the best basketball team I will ever see in Tallahassee. I'll just admit that now. That team was so unbelievably good. And yeah, this 2023 team is good, but we've seen better teams. We will see better teams. At the same time, I can't believe it's taken me 2 hours to say this. 2023 is the most likable team we've had at Florida State. And I don't know that we can debate that much. As much as we all personally love the 2013 team, if you take a backwards glance, you're like, there's some off-field stuff there that I don't exactly love. There's a narrative that I don't exactly love. We didn't have that at all.
I will say, as a coach, Mike Norvell is highly likable across not just only the Florida State fan base, but across the country. He's very likable. And that's
a very likable team.
If you have a coach that you can root for, Jimbo, he was an asshole. Jimbo was an asshole, but he was winning games, and you're happy because he was winning games. But for Mike Norvell, you just kind of have an extra hurt there for a guy that Dustin, connected with us right before he even probably took office. I hit his DMs right away once he got hired, and he DM'd back, if you ever need anything, Logan, let me know. If there's a story that you need to write about that, involves our program, let me know. And if you have any question marks, let me know. And, Mike Norvell has been very hands-on with the media, and just to see what they do in practices and stuff, man, you feel for those kids. You go to, what Florida State does all throughout the off season and those training, it is not easy. And we've heard from multiple players, transfers coming in, it is not easy to adjust. So just imagining what they spent their whole entire spring, summer workouts under Coach Storms, it's absolute hell on earth. And just to go fully undefeated and not get a chance, an opportunity to what could have been. Florida State versus Washington matchup is a good goddamn matchup. I'm just going to say it right now. It's a damn good matchup. It's a phenomenal matchup with Penix going against Florida State's defense. And, you figure out too, what Mike Norvell, you get the whole Penix.
It's not.
Penix versus FSU's defense.
It's Penix.
It's Penix.
I like Penix better. Penix, I mean.
Yo,
just got clipped.
Clip that. No.
Sayonara.
Clip that.
End the stream. I'm editing this. Once I get out, I'm going on YouTube editor. I'm editing that part out. So
that's like that Patrick Payton comment from earlier this year. I got that screenshot in the meme folder.
In your meme folder, yeah.
I've been made fun of for 2 years for slipping up. It's
You're
time for
literally
Logan.
was slipping up. You were literally gonna have something slip up.
I know what I said, but I want that clip too. I want that haunting Logan for the next 2 years.
Oh God,
that's not near. That's not near as bad.
It's close.
Brutal.
It's close.
No,
close.
I don't know.
Just saying it versus saying where it's gonna go.
And you physically that would be something physical to happen to you. I just said I like the quarterback's last name.
It's not his last name though.
I'm glad we could have a laugh though at the very end of this because it was not so fun to talk about for an hour.
It's a sarcastic laugh. I'm still pissed off.
It is, but tough. But I think that's going to end off this episode. Dylan, appreciate you coming on here. It was great getting your take on everything as well. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you guys go check out Dylan's piece. That's published, right, Dustin?
No, it's not even done.
I don't even think it's in Tempest.
Yeah, it's not. Mine's done. Mine's
Look
done.
out
I'm
for
just
that.
waiting.
Got a few thousand more words to go.
All right, good. Perfect. So if anybody has about an hour in their day, do it. Or, we need like audio. Shoot, you should just put it in podcast form.
Listen, it's the Oppenheimer. It's the Oppenheimer of articles. So,
I mean, I set the standard at 6,000. So I expect more than that.
I got to keep going.
Oh God, look at Dustin. It's like that. This is the.
I'm going to.
I don't want.
Dustin asked. Dustin requested it, and I said, I will never stop. And he said, "That's the spirit." So I'm listening to my editor in chief.
I said that sarcastically, though.
Yeah, but you can't tell sarcasm through text. I see those words. I'm like, oh, bet I'm about to make you suffer.
He's already sorry. I'll be honest. It's no sleep. I'll give him this. Usually, I can't let Dustin get away with stuff, but that's been a rough 72-hour stretch, and we're not close to being done yet, man. But tons of content going out.
I took a 6 a.m. flight home for the college football playoff content, and just got screwed. I mean,
you could have stayed in Charlotte. We could have been depressed together.
I was stranded in Charlotte. It was horrible. I don't think I left bed.
Yeah, I didn't. I can tell you I didn't leave bed Sunday. I was upset. And then Monday I only got up to go to the College Cup to watch the Lady Knowles win a national championship.
It makes me feel better. It makes us feel. That makes us do feel better.
Slightly better.
Yeah, still a lot of rage. So FSU fan base, hold it together as much as you can. But we understand if you got to let it out on Twitter and Facebook or our comments. Let's just make sure we're all safe in there. And I'm already seeing a lot of threats. This is what you do when you piss off FSU Twitter, man. They'll come for you.
It's not even Twitter. It's not even Twitter. It's the government. It's everybody.
The college football playoff took down their contact page with all the phone numbers and email addresses.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. That's content, man. That's content for tomorrow. Write that down. Sign me up.
I'm pretty sure. Let me go try and pull it up again.
Yeah, check on that before we. I'll do my usual. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, we had a ton of likes on here, a lot of viewers. But hit that like button if you're still hanging around with us, or if you enjoyed the episode listening afterward. But appreciate everybody hopping on here with us, asking questions, giving us some topics. We'll be live here next Wednesday at 7. So the show goes on. It doesn't stop from here. And then also thank you, Dylan, for hopping on here, and make sure you guys go check out his piece and VZ's by the end of the week. Those will be coming out, giving y'all some good insight and getting their thoughts on what happened to Florida State getting screwed out of the college football playoff.
I will note, very opinionated. I don't get to do it often, so I went all out.
Yep.
Likewise.
Nope. Absolutely. Do we know if that contact page is still up there?
I can't even find it, so that makes me think it's not.
Yeah, it's got to.
I
don't understand why they would even do that. I don't understand why they would do that in the first place. Like, they're just asking for it. And definitely a year like this, any fan base is going to come for you. But specifically, Florida State's, best of luck. Good luck. But, that's going to wrap it up, everybody. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week. We'll talk to you guys next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.
Not the silk word, 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me, not the silk word, 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me, not the silk word, 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me, not the silk